everyone. This is the Crime Cafe, your podcasting source of great crime, suspense, and thriller writing. I'm your host, Debbi Mack. Before I bring on my guest, I'll just remind you that the Crime Cafe has 2 ebooks for sale, the 9-book box set and the short story anthology. You can find the buy links for both on my website, debbimack.com, under the Crime Cafe link. You can also get a free copy of either book if you become a Patreon supporter. You'll get that and much more if you support the podcast on Patreon, along with our eternal gratitude for doing so. But first, let me put in a good word for Blueberry Podcasting. I'm a Blueberry affiliate, but that's not the only reason I'm telling you this. I've been using Blueberry Podcasting as my hosting service for my podcast for years, and it's one of the best decisions I ever made. They give great customer service. You're in complete control of your own podcast. You can run it from your own website, and it just takes a lot of the work out of podcasting for me. I find for that reason that it's a company that I can get behind 100% and say, you should try this. Try Blueberry. It doesn't require a long-term contract, and it's just a great company, period. And it also has free technical support by email, video, and phone. So you can get a human being there. Isn't that nice? Hi, everyone. My guest today is the award-winning author of the Alexa Williams suspense novels, including Dead of Autumn, Dead of Spring, and Dead on the Delta. A lot of environmental stuff mixed in there. I love that. A retired executive in the government and health insurance industry, she draws on her professional background and her extensive travels for story material. Her most recent publication is a travel memoir called Beyond the Sunset. It's my pleasure to introduce my guest today, Sherry Knowlton. Hi, Sherry. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Well, I'm very happy to have you here, believe me. It seems like forever ago I read Dead on the Delta, and I still remember the descriptions of the safari your protagonist went on. It was, I was impressed with how you created a story that dealt with Alexis' personal relationships, as well as the political, economic, and environmental issues associated with elephant poaching and other bad things. Can you tell us about the series and what inspired you to write it?
Okay. The series as a whole is called the Alexa Williams suspense series, and there are actually 5 novels so far.
Ah,
I the Most of them, the Dead on the Delta is a little bit unique, which we can talk about in a minute, but the first 4 are all seasons, as you said, some of them in the titles: Dead of Autumn, Summer, Spring, and Winter. And those are all based in this local area where I live, which is southeastern Pennsylvania. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. And I was inspired actually because I wanted to write about an actual incident that had occurred in the local area, where the dead body of a young woman was found, and for years nobody could identify who she was, and that always sort of touched a chord. And so it inspired me to write. And then each of my subsequent novels does have a theme, whether it's women's issues, environmental issues. Those are probably the two big ones. When I wrote Dead on the Delta, I had run out of seasons. So, which of course I didn't think when I started with, maybe I should have done something with more than 4. So after I'd exhausted the seasons, I had to come up with both a new title and a new premise. And so I decided to send my protagonist, Alexa Williams, to Africa, to Botswana specifically, to help her boyfriend, who has been in all of the books a lion researcher, so that it wasn't too far fetched to suddenly pop her off to Africa. And I was inspired to write Dead on the Delta, primarily because of first of all, I'm a big wildlife conservationist. And second of all, my husband and I have traveled to Africa on safari multiple times and simply love Botswana. And so I wanted to write about an issue that was near and dear to my heart and a place that I love to visit.
That's awesome. I would love to go there. I mean, there are so many places I would love to travel. Botswana is one of them. Um, did you have to do a lot of research into the politics and so forth when you were writing that novel in particular?
Yeah, with Dead on the, I mean, all of my novels take some research, even though I often write about topics that I'm familiar with. And the idea of writing a novel about Botswana seemed very good. And then when I started to sit down and really get into the details, I thought, okay, going to Botswana for a couple of weeks here and there over the years isn't quite being expert on the situation. So I really had to research the politics, which in the middle of my writing ended up changing a little bit with a new election. Um, I had to learn really more of the specifics of elephant poaching. And then I also realized that although the idea of being a lion researcher sounded really cool to me, I didn't really know what they did on a day-to-day basis other than like good stuff about lions. So yes, I did have to do a lot of research, and uh, I decided, and this was partly selfish, but my husband and I decided to go to Botswana again, and we actually spent a month there doing research for the book, both on safari and then talking to people in the capital city there, learning about the politics and so forth, and the government.
That's fascinating. That is like a once in a lifetime experience, I would think.
Yeah.
My gosh. Do you have plans to write more Alexa stories now that you're out of seasons? Hey, at least you didn't follow the alphabet like somebody I can name.
Yeah, somebody. Yeah, somebody. Uh, um, yes, I do actually. I'm working now on another Alexa book. I'd say I'm in the very early stages, because I did take a detour sort of during the pandemic and write a travel memoir, 2 volumes, and so now I'm back into the Alexa again, getting my head back into that one. And although I can't talk about all the specifics, I will say that she's back home in South Central Pennsylvania for this one.
Uh-huh. And you're in South Central Pennsylvania.
I am, yes.
Is it close to any major city?
Well, Harrisburg is the state capital, although when most people think of Pennsylvania, I believe they either think of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, which, Philadelphia is on the east of the state, Pittsburgh is on the west. Harrisburg is sort of on the southern part of the state in the middle. We are known around here. I live near a city, a small town, really, more than a city, called Carlisle, but we're near the Gettysburg battlefield. People know where that is a lot of times. The Carlisle Army War College is here for the whole country. Um, there's lots of people who go to car shows that happen in Carlisle. It's funny. I'll be in California and somebody will say, "Oh I've been to the car show in Carlisle. Um, so it's a charming little area, and it's much more rural than I think people who don't live in Pennsylvania would think. Pennsylvania, except for Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, are very and farmland.
Yes, yes, very much. It's a very rural state, actually. And in many ways, Maryland is
Yes,
also
it
a very
is.
rural state in certain parts. Um,
Exactly.
Even though there's a lot
Yeah.
that's been urbanized over the years. Let's see. You, Now, your travel memoir, this is your first nonfiction book, correct?
It is. Yes.
And it must have been a very different
Yes.
experience writing it.
Um, and it was. I mean, it was a lot of fun in a way because it gave me a chance to sort of remember a lot of the probably a 50-year span of, and being that I wrote it during the pandemic, we couldn't travel anywhere, so it was a sort of a way to re-travel in my mind. But it took me a while to figure out the format that I wanted to do. For years, people have been telling me that when either Mike, my husband, or I, tell some little anecdote about our travels, they say, "Oh, you should write a book about this," and and so that's sort of easier said than done, right?
Yeah,
And I wanted it to be a memoir of our travels, but I also didn't want to be a like a travel book, like the best place to go in Las Vegas, or to be all about my life, just about, my uh, inner thoughts and all of that. So I did sort of a hybrid where I started the book with several chapters about how I got into to traveling, how I think reading, because I've been a big reader all my life, really influenced my desire to travel. And then the rest of the book is a series of essays about different topics. Like one topic is transportation, and I talk about all of the interesting and sometimes really crazy types of transportation we've been on around the world, everything from tuk-tuks to elephants as a way of transportation. Another chapter is encounters with wildlife. So, I take different topics, and then I even work in a chapter or two of tips for travelers, because we've gone on so many different types of trips over the years that we have some standard things we do that I thought I'd share with readers.
that's excellent. That's really excellent. Um, can you share some of those tips with us now? Especially
Okay.
now and with the pandemic and so forth. What are your thoughts on traveling right now?
Well, I I think that it's time that you can go for it, but I do think you have to still be careful. And my husband and I this summer went to Brazil, to a place called the Pantanal, which is a remote wetland area where we saw jaguars. That was our whole sort of focus. We wanted to see jaguars in the wild. And then we also went on an Amazon River cruise on a small boat as well in Peru. And uh, we went with very small tour groups, like 10, 12 people, and everybody was pre-screened for COVID. We had tests. In one case, a nurse actually tested us before we could get on the boat. But even so, we got a message after we left the boat, the Amazon boat, that one of our party came down with COVID when she got home. So I think, like everywhere these days, you are taking your chances, but in both of these cases, we felt a little safer because they required us to be fully vaccinated and boosted and all of that. Um, the scariest part was flying.
Mhm.
Although the airlines that we used at that time, everybody was still wearing masks, so that raised our comfort level. Um, I think it's a matter of personal preference, but we're planning a trip next summer as well. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes.
Oh, fantastic. I think it's fantastic that you've been able to travel so much and spend so much time in one place and really get to know it. That's amazing. Let's see. What authors have most inspired your writing, and who do you enjoy reading?
Oh, wow. Um, I, I was an English major, so I've read lots and lots of the classics, and I'd have to say that all of those have inspired me. What some of my favorites when I was in school were Ernest Hemingway, who I know has fallen out of favor a bit, but and also I did an independent studies on D.H. Lawrence, who also is maybe not as well regarded these days. But somewhere along the line, after I read all those weighty classics, I really started to drift into suspense and thrillers. And so when I read today, mostly for pleasure, I will try to read a wide range, and it's not all suspense and thrillers, but my all-time favorite, and I'm going back in time again here, is John D. MacDonald. He wrote the Travis McGee series, and I think he was like ahead of his time. Uh, Travis was like a white knight who captured, always captured the bad guys and saved the damsel in distress. But he was sort of an environmentalist before there was such a word as environmentalist, and so I really like that about him. Some of the contemporary authors I always try to read. uh, Lee Childs is one. I like Greg Iles. I love Greg Iles. He wrote this trilogy about the South that involves history and uh, threads of racism and family dynasties. And I think he's a really good author too.
Hmm. Well, those are all great choices. Yeah, John McDonald. Yeah, he sure was an environmentalist ahead of his time, wasn't he?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Boy. Um, how would you describe your mysteries to somebody who isn't familiar with your work? Is it kind of like cozy? Is it more adventure mystery? How would you describe it? Thriller?
I would say, often I say mystery slash suspense. They're definitely not cozy. So people do get killed. Not so much on the page, but there's a lot of danger and suspense. Um, the seasons novels also have a historical story that parallels the contemporary story and intersects. Maybe that's why I like Greg Iles, because of I like the way history just seems to keep repeating itself in some ways. But it's not flat out thriller either. So I'd say suspense. Sometimes I say it's Nancy Drew for grown-ups.
Cool. And better written. I saw Nancy
Yeah.
Drew recently, and I was just struck by how wooden the writing was, frankly.
Uh-huh. Well,
This was
you
one of
know
the
what,
later books.
I was shocked when I grew up and found out that what's Carolyn Keene was the author, right? That
Right.
she wasn't like a real person. I mean, she was
Uh-huh.
a series of real people. And I was so disappointed when I found that out.
I know the feeling. Yeah, I grew up in those books too and had the same sort of
Uh-huh.
feeling. It's like,
Yeah.
what do you mean she doesn't exist? Huh? These books are proof.
Exactly,
Uh,
exactly.
let's see. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we finish up?
Oh, well, I guess,
Any new developments with the series that you can share?
well, I think that the main thing is people keep asking, well, when's the next Alexa book coming out? And, I love that people are engaged enough that they actually are, wanting the next one to come out. And I
Absolutely.
have to disappoint them a little when I say I'm just starting this next one. But it is bringing her back to some of the familiar territory, and I expect to even revisit some themes that and situations from the first book. So I think it will all come together and be of interest. But as always, I'll try to work in some women's issues and environmental themes as well.
That's great. I mean, I'm always impressed when people bring meaty topics to their mystery or suspense writing. I mean, it's
Well,
more
and
than just a bunch of bodies. There are real issues
uh,
here.
yeah, and I think that's like part of the reason that I like to write. I guess the other thing I would say though is that it's a balancing act, because you don't want to have them a reader pick up a book who and think it's a suspense novel and find out that in fact they're getting like a sermon on whatever. And so I like to keep people on the edge of their seat, and but have the theme be one that hopefully I'm conveying a message. Um,
And what
I,
better
I
way
guess
to do it?
exactly. And the only other thing I would mention is, since we did talk a little bit about my travel book, is that my publisher, Sunbury Press, decided that it really should be broken into two volumes. Ooh. Um, because it contains a lot of photos that my husband and I took on our travels around the world. And so the first volume is out now. It's called Beyond the Sunset: Adventures Outside My Comfort Zone. The second volume, which is also Beyond the Sunset, but it's volume 2, Expanding My Horizons, that will come out in December. So if people are interested, give them a look.
That's interesting. How are the two parts different?
It's really, I guess, a continuation
Mm.
of the second is a continuation of the first, but it deals with different topics, each, different sets of essays. And maybe I'd say that volume 2, I turn a little bit. I start the first one by, talking more about my initial journey into traveling. The last part of volume 2 talks a little bit about how I think I, as a person, have benefited so much from traveling. So I turn inward a little bit more, and also talk about the way that traveling, as you said earlier in the session, that it really has influenced my writing as well.
Very good. Well, I love the sound of that. I mean, it just sounds great. A travel memoir in two parts.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
I want to thank you so much for being here again. It was really great talking to you.
Oh, and I really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Sure thing. Um, I hope that everybody out there also enjoyed listening to this interview. If you did, please leave a review where you listen to podcasts and consider becoming a patron of the show. I still have to start putting up revised chapters from my latest novel on Patreon, and I hope to get to that real soon, honest. I've been putting up chapters of my other work there. In any case, we offer bonus episodes and copies of all the transcripts, which I'm compiling season by season as I go. So check out our Patreon page. Our next episode in 2 weeks will feature my guest, Skylar Randall. In the meantime, take care and happy reading.